Good day, everyone. The Clinical and Laboratory Standards Institute is pleased to present this webinar, Expanding CLSI Involvement at Your Organization. My name is Darian, and I'm your host for today's program. Please note that this presentation is being recorded and all participants are muted. The program will last up to 60 minutes and will include question and answer opportunities. We encourage you to submit your questions at any time through the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen. In a few moments, we will be sending you a link to the handouts through the chat box at the bottom of your screen. This includes a copy of the PowerPoint slides, which will be available in both a full page and 3 slides per page view. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenters. Vicki Petrides has more than 25 years of experience at Abbott Laboratories, where she is a statistician and quality program manager in Abbott's Corporate Quality and Regulatory Office. She is currently responsible for reviewing pre-market submissions between all of Abbott's diagnostic divisions and the US FDA, and for establishing and leading Abbott's Laboratory Standards Intelligence Team. Vicki serves as Abbott's primary delegate to the Clinical Laboratory and Standards Institute, serving on CLSI's Consensus Council and multiple document development committees. Katie Barnett is CLSI's Director of Membership and User Experience and has been with CLSI for the past 14 years. She previously held the positions of Membership Director and Manager of Membership and Marketing. Jessica Treadway is CLSI's Customer Relationship Manager. Her responsibilities include building, retaining, maintaining, and fostering relationships between CLSI and its stakeholders, including members, customers, volunteers, and vendors. At this time, I'll turn it over to Katie to get us started.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. We really appreciate you joining us here today. We're very excited about this webinar and introducing more about what you can do as a delegate. I'm going to turn it over to Jessica to take us through a few slides. Thanks.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's having a good morning. CLSI currently has 16,000 volunteers from 48 different countries. These volunteers represent government, industry, and healthcare professions. Through volunteering, you are helping to shape laboratory standards. By being a CLSI volunteer, you can share your expertise, enhance your career, gain recognition, and network with other professionals. It is important to be a part of the community that is trying to provide guidance and best practices to laboratorians around the world. Vicki will talk further about why it is important for her company and companies like hers to volunteer with CLSI. You can review your company's volunteer roster in your MyCLSI account at any time. It can be found under the volunteer section in the left-hand side menu when logged into your account. You can review both active and inactive lists of volunteers and export that list to a CSV file as well. You can also review and stay aware of pending volunteer applications by staff at your organization under the company volunteer roster. The position field will show as pending and update once the committee is processed. You will also be able to see which site, if you are part of an industry level 1 or health system, the volunteer is from. CLSI Document Development Committee is a group of technical experts from an equal balance of the government, industry, and healthcare constituencies who work together to develop a CLSI document. Subcommittees are responsible for documents in a topic area. They write draft documents, evaluate and respond to comments, conduct document reviews, and may be responsible for continual revision of documents. Working groups focus on tasks that support the work of a subcommittee. A working group's assignment is usually limited in scope. They can include writing a document, a section of a document, or conducting a technical study. The volunteer roles for these groups range from novice to very experienced. A detailed explanation of all volunteer roles that are available and that would be listed in the company volunteer roster can be found on our website at any time. The link to the information is at the top of the company volunteer roster page as well. There are currently no calls for volunteers as they are added on a rolling basis due to committee needs. However, you can check what opportunities are available at any time on our website. You can also make sure that you and other staff are signed up for CLSI emails and make sure that your areas of interest include volunteering to make sure you are aware of new opportunities as they arise. Your areas of interest can be updated in your My CLSI account, and each individual under your organization can set up their own preferences as well. We are very excited to announce that CLSI's new member logo is now available on our website. We encourage members to use the logo to highlight their commitment to laboratory excellence. The terms and conditions can be found on our website. We also have different versions that are available for download and use. An email with all the information regarding this logo will also be sent to all delegates and alternate delegates next week. We are also very excited to announce the new delegate commenting feature. You and staff can access the portal using the direct URL, clicking the commenting and voting button on your My CLSI homepage dashboard, or by navigating to Exchange in the top CLSI banner, then selecting Adaptive Voting and Commenting. The login for the portal is the same as your CLSI website login that you use for Eclipse, Exchange, and all our CLSI related things. Our commenting portal now allows you to provide your staff with access to a document during proposed draft review. As the delegate or alternate for your organization, when your staff comments, you'll be able to review, edit, and/or approve their comments before voting on behalf of your organization. If you want to share a document with a new employee, they will need to be set up in your My CLSI account under Manage Users, similar to how you set up other individuals for Eclipse and other member benefit access. If an employee is already listed under the membership, they will already have access to the documents during proposed draft review and should follow the steps provided before on accessing the commenting portal. When staff go to add a comment, they will see a red banner that reminds them that they are commenting on behalf of the delegate. That will include the delegate's name or the alternate delegate's name. As the delegate, you will then be able to review, edit, and/or approve employee comments before voting on behalf of your organization by the deadline. Please note that you can see comments added by your employees at any time during the open period when accessing the document in the commenting portal. It is important to note that you are the comment approver and final submitter of them for a document. They will not be submitted unless the delegate or alternate delegate does so. When you log into the commenting platform, you will see a warning notification that there is a draft comment pending and can hyperlink to it from the quick monitor. We are also in the process of setting up email notifications that will alert you prior to the deadline of these pending comments for your review. When on the document, click on the View Comment Report to see all comments that have been made. You would click on Manage My Draft Comments to see the comments submitted by your staff that you can then decide to edit, submit as is, or delete. This is an example of what the draft comments would look like for your review. You would then be able to select Submit or delete the comment accordingly. If there are any questions at any point about using this new feature, or you would like to schedule a separate demo to go over this one-on-one, I'd be happy to set that up with you. I will now hand it over to Vicki to discuss how Abbott has created a CLSI Intelligence Team.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you to CLSI for inviting me here today. So first, to give you a little bit more background about why I'm here today, I started volunteering on various CLSI document development committees, or DDCs, about 10 years ago. And during that time, I recognized that within Abbott, there was not really one person who was coordinating all of the volunteering efforts that were going on. I also noted that the CLSI documents would sometimes be updated or published, and then in some cases, these were ones that we used on a regular basis, but that no one within Abbott was participating in their development. In most cases, that was not a big deal, but I was concerned that a document could be published that would potentially alter Abbott's practices in a way that we weren't expecting. And this was especially important to me at the time because at that time, my role as a member of Abbott's largest diagnostics division was to design studies and write the protocol templates for executing those studies. And CLSI was my main reference for creating those protocols. So I really didn't want to be taken off guard when a new document came out that dramatically or could potentially dramatically change the way we do things. So it was through this experience that I realized that Abbott could really benefit from having someone proactively identify which CLSI documents were important to our business, and then have a strategic coordinated effort for recruiting volunteers and participating on those GDCs. So this is what eventually led me to forming Abbott's Laboratory Standards Intelligence Team in the fall of 2021. The foundation of which started with me expanding Abbott's involvement in CLSI. So here's just a brief outline of what I'll talk about today. I'll first address why CLSI involvement is important. What are some of the challenges? And then I'll go into more detail about our specific journey within Abbott. So why is CLSI involvement important? Obviously, if you're on the phone, you do recognize that that is certainly an important thing, but in general, actively engaging in CLSI activities has a variety of benefits, not only for the organizations as a whole, but also for individual volunteers. So some of those advantages of being involved include being able to influence and lead industry standards. Like I said, my role in our diagnostics business initially was to write the protocol templates for how we were executing studies. And so when there were cases where we didn't have a CLSI guideline to follow, for example, I would come up with a recommendation. And then when I would see CLSI was going to create a guideline for that, I wanted to be part of that so I could share what Abbott was doing, and hopefully CLSI then would agree to how Abbott was doing, and we could go forward with that approach, or I might find a new and better way to approach a particular study. And having the opportunity to participate in that and set those standards was really valuable to Abbott as a whole and to me personally and professionally. This also helps anyone involved to remain informed of the evolving industry practices and gain a deeper understanding of the rationale behind certain decisions and directions that are made as the guidelines are developed. For those of you who may have participated in GDC, you may be aware that there's only so much time you have to develop a document. And while the team might have a lot of great ideas about what they want to include, sometimes we have to discuss and make strategic decisions about what is ultimately included versus not included in the document. And having an understanding of the thought process behind what we ultimately include in a document versus not is helpful too when you are in a business and trying to, say, implement a guideline, and you might think, well, did they not include this one aspect or detail because it's not important, it's not appropriate, or is it just that there wasn't enough time and room to develop and include that in the guidance? So by participating in those discussions, you understand the nuances behind what's ultimately included in that. And also one of the advantages, like I said, is just it gives you an opportunity to develop professionally and network with others. As was mentioned earlier, I've spent my entire career only at Abbott. And while it's been great, one of the concerns that I had in dedicating myself solely to Abbott was that I was perhaps not fully aware of what else is out there, how other groups, organizations, both other manufacturers, regulatory agencies, and hospitals and laboratories are doing things. And because I had a very narrow view, I was concerned I was missing something. So that was one of the other motivations for me getting involved in CLSI, and participating in these committees really helped me see other perspectives that I wouldn't have seen otherwise had I remained only focused on, at the time, just R&D within Abbott. So there are consequences of not being involved as well. Some of those can lead to not following the latest best practices, of course, having to be reactive rather than proactive in response to changes in practices. Like I said, I had a couple of situations where I didn't realize initially that there was work being done on particular types of guidelines, and once they were published, I had to quickly respond to that by then updating our processes internally to adjust to that. And also, if you're not following these latest practices, that can lead as a manufacturer to potential delays in regulatory reviews and ultimately time to market. It's important to recognize too that engaging in CLSI can be advantageous to the organization involved, as well as to the other constituencies with whom they interact. So if I'm a manufacturer and I'm not following the CLSI guidelines to, let's say, assess precision, for example, but the other competitors are, when my product is sold to a laboratory and the laboratory is trying to validate or verify the performance of my product in their lab, they're having to think about, okay, well, how is what Abbott is claiming for their precision differing from how another manufacturer might be claiming their precision? And they might have to think, well, do I need to verify this performance a little differently because Abbott did it differently? So it's really advantageous for all constituencies involved when everyone is engaged in CLSI. So there are some challenges, of course, though, too, to being engaged. I've noted a few of those challenges here, some of which are ensuring that the voices of all stakeholders are comprehended, communicating changes, dedicating the time to volunteering, and finding the right volunteers. Like I said, these are a few of the challenges that I've noted, but these challenges, of course, can vary within any organization. So now I'll get into a little bit more detail about Abbott's journey to expanding our involvement in CLSI. So just to give you a bit more background about Abbott itself, Abbott has 6 diagnostic divisions. Each division operates as an independent company. And some of those divisions are quite large. So even within a given division, you might know people at your site, but you might not necessarily know all of the others who are working in the division, of course. And definitely you may not know the individuals, even those who are doing your same or similar job function in the other divisions of Abbott. We have over 100,000 employees who are worldwide, and we have a diverse product portfolio. That includes products such as blood screening, clinical chemistry. We have rapid tests, point of care tests, as well as large instrument systems. We also have continuous glucose monitors and lab track systems. So the variety of products can be a challenge if you're trying to have one volunteer represent all of the needs of these various divisions, product portfolio, and employees worldwide. And as I said earlier, when I initially started this, there was no, I would say here there's no strategy, but I would say there was a loose strategy regarding CLSI engagement. So I would say there were pockets of individuals who might have been trying to coordinate the efforts of volunteers within their specific organization. So it might have been within their department or perhaps their R&D organization, but it wasn't an Abbott-wide coordinated effort. So because of this, after I joined Abbott's corporate office, after having been in the diagnostic business for many years, I joined the corporate office in 2020. I became Abbott's primary delegate to CLSI. So I initially thought that the delegate role was just an administrative role responsible for renewing Abbott's annual membership. But as I looked into it, I realized that serving as a delegate offered a lot more responsibilities and opportunities than I originally realized. One of the things I discovered was that I could see the roster of current and past volunteers, which Jessica had showed. And that was really helpful to me because I used that to identify potential volunteers. And I also use that to identify what I called random volunteers, individuals who may have even been in my own business who were volunteering and I just had no idea that they were doing so. So this is what I started with when I started to build the CLSI Intelligence Team. So I took that volunteer roster and then I reached out to the heads of quality, regulatory, and R&D at each of Abbott's diagnostic businesses, and I explained to them my vision for the team. I noted to them who from their organization were already volunteering, and then I asked them to identify at least one individual within their business area to serve on this intelligence team. I noted to them that the team rep did not necessarily have to be a current volunteer, but that it was important that whoever the team rep was someone I could count on to communicate information about CLSI activities, changes, publications, opportunities, and make sure that that person who they identified knew the business well enough and knew other people well enough so that they could connect them. Because it wasn't possible for me. I didn't want to send email blasts to all Abbott diagnostic employees. I wanted to make sure that we were focusing our efforts on those individuals who were really needed to know and were capable of communicating the information. So the responsibilities of the team once formed were to identify CLSI topic areas and documents that were relevant to each of their businesses, identify and solicit volunteers to participate in those activities, gather input and share knowledge relevant to the CLSI activities across businesses and functional areas, and then assess and communicate the impact of new or revised documents across businesses and functional areas. In the end, what happened, what I originally had in mind, like I said, we have 6 diagnostic businesses. When I originally was forming the team, I thought to myself, okay, I don't want this to be too large. And so I thought maybe 1 to 2 people per business would be good, with a cross-section of quality, regulatory, and technical expertise. So I figured probably about 12 people would be a good number that I could work with. It wouldn't be too large and it would be comprehensive enough to get what I needed. What ended up happening was I did start off with 12, but as we continued to meet and discuss things, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, that team actually grew because others, as they started hearing about what we were doing and seeing the communications, they asked to join the team or sit in on our team meetings so they too could hear firsthand what was going on. So I took that to be a good sign that people were recognizing the value of engagement and the value that this process was providing. So one of the more beneficial steps that we've taken, and this is something that we've taken more recently, is to formally identify which topic areas were relevant to each business. So initially what I did was I had taken the expert panel areas and I had presented that to the team and I said, okay, please let me know in your business which of these expert panel areas are important to your business. That I got kind of lukewarm feedback on that. So I realized that didn't really help. And so for a while, we just went along, and as volunteer opportunities became available, I would just share that information with the team, ask anyone if they had someone who was interested in volunteering, see if it, and then I would go from there. Also, what was happening was initially when I would get a CLSI document for review and comment, I would send that document out to everyone on the team and I would ask them for reviews and comments. And again, depending on the document, I would say in most cases, I wasn't getting a lot of feedback, if any. So what I realized was a couple of things. One is that sometimes I'd be sending out documents for comment that were not relevant to any of the businesses, but I wasn't always aware of that. So one of the things, like I said, we did more recently was we created this matrix. And this has really helped a lot because what I did was I listed all of the CLSI documents that were available. I also noted all of the documents that were in development. And I asked each of the representatives to go through the matrix and identify whether a particular document was one they would like to influence, one they would like to be aware of, or if it was something that was not relevant. This has been really helpful because now I can direct my communications and limit the amount of email that I send to people so that if I know, for example, that a particular document is not relevant to any of the businesses within Abbott, when it comes time to vote, I can just cast our vote as abstaining because it's not something that is relevant. Whereas if there's something that not only we find it's something that is relevant and we want to be aware of, but we want to influence it, I'll make sure that we identify somebody to comment on that. And if it's a document that is open, has an open call for volunteers, we'll work hard to recruit somebody to apply to be on that GDC. So this has been extraordinarily helpful. The other thing that has helped us do is when we've identified which documents are ones, especially that we want to influence or be aware of, and we notice that there are a whole bunch of, let's say, EP documents, for example, I then know that, okay, the expert panel that oversees those documents also has a lot of influence about what goes on in those committees and which committees actually are formed for revisions or creating new documents. So I've used that information to target particular expert panels and identify individuals within Abbott to serve on those expert panels. So that's been really helpful as well. Another step that has been helpful, but one is that we're still, I would say, refining more formally, is implementing a volunteering and vetting and training process. So we currently have slides on general rules, responsibilities, and expectations in engaging as a volunteer. And I often, in fact, every time I meet with a new volunteer or new potential volunteer in particular, I often will point them to CLSI's training materials because I think those are very helpful. But I also have elaborated a bit on those internally in the sense that I make it clear when I meet with the volunteers that my expectation is that while they may be volunteering and they may be coming from a specific business area or functional area within Abbott, my expectation is that they are also communicating with their colleagues in other businesses who have a vested interest in this particular topic. So just to give an example, CLSI EP 17, which is a document on limits of blank detection and quantitation, is one that is currently undergoing revision. So when I announced that there was a call for volunteers for that, I had a lot of interest from all of the businesses within Abbott because everyone uses that document. So what we did was we identified within the core team, okay, who we think might be a good person to participate as a volunteer. But because I wasn't sure what kind of background the committee chairs were looking for, I encouraged actually everyone who was interested to apply. And then I formally, even though they also applied through CLSI, I also formally nominated them myself so that CLSI could be aware that I knew that they were applying, and there wasn't just someone randomly from Abbott applying. And that way, what ultimately ended up happening is we ended up having one person who was very experienced on CLSI serving as volunteer for this. And so one person is the member, and we have someone else serving as an observer or an advisor on the committee. That person is newer to volunteering with CLSI. So that person is being mentored by that individual who is more experienced. So that's something that's really helped for us a lot as well, because that helps us to deepen our bench of potential volunteers and leaders within CLSI in the future. And I met with both of those individuals, and they're from two different areas of two different businesses within Abbott. I met with both of them once they were appointed, and I expressed to them how important it was for them to make sure that they keep not only the CLSI Intelligence Team informed of updates and conversations that are going on within the committee as the committee evolved and started to reach consensus. But I also asked that they please make sure that they are including the individuals from the other businesses and meeting with them separately to make sure that their needs are comprehended. So one other thing I do too is anyone who's not sure, thinks that they might be interested in volunteering, but there's not a particular opportunity available currently, I encourage them to fill out a volunteer profile on CLSI's website. So that way, once an opportunity does become available that I think they would be good for, then I will formally nominate them so that they are, again, like I said, CLSI is aware that I'm aware of their interest and activity in this, in volunteering. So one of the things that we do as a team, as this core intelligence team does meet monthly. And during those monthly meetings, I invite various committee members to provide an update, and it can be just a quick update. Sometimes it's a little bit more involved. And it depends on where the different DDCs or expert panels are in the whole process in general. So for example, we have some volunteers on CLSI EP 40, which is the carryover guideline that is being developed. It will be a first edition. And there's been a lot of discussion within that committee about the various study designs. So I invited the representative on that committee to share an update with the intelligence team, just to let them know, some of the discussions that have been going on within the DDC, let them know the direction that they're taking, why they're taking this direction versus another direction, just to keep them informed so that once this document does get further along, then they'll be prepared to more intelligently be able to focus on particular areas of the document that they might want to comment on, and also prepare for implementing this document once it does become formally published. During the monthly meetings, I also announce any volunteer opportunities. I indicate whether or not we've had applications and appointments to committees. And I remind people of documents that are ready for either comment or vote. And then I inform people of upcoming or final recent publications as well. And some of this, like I said, is also communicated via email, but sometimes it's helpful to also discuss it internally because it gives people an option to, or the opportunity to talk with each other and ask, okay, hey, I know that, for example, linearity changed recently. Has your business updated your practices to do that? Any challenges you found? Things like that. So they're able to discuss that. And that's very, very valuable. And one of the reasons why individuals have asked to be included in these meetings, even though they may not have initially been identified as the initial representative from their area. In terms of commenting and voting on CLSI documents, like I said, when somebody is participating on a CLSI committee, I encourage them to create a group of, and I'll refer to it as an internal shadow team, to talk about documents to make sure that they're getting the input they need across businesses. The teams don't necessarily meet on a regular cadence, but as developments occur, as discussions are needed, they will reach out and then talk about that within those shadow committees, and then they'll bring that back to the intelligence team. For cases where we don't have a representative on a committee, when a document is published or nearing publication and we have the opportunity to comment, identify a point person to look through to see, okay, is there anything that we need to be particularly aware of? And I'll have them give some highlights to the team that helps them be able to focus and comment more and direct the document to someone who might be more of an expert in a particular area. Let's say it's something on HIV, for example. We'll then circulate the documents for internal review. And I'm excited to use CLSI's new commenting feature. I haven't quite mastered that yet, but I've been working on it within my team. We've been talking about it, so look forward to working on that. And then we of course collate those comments and cast our votes on the CLSI documents. One of the other things that we do is we do provide training or an overview of the new and revised CLSI documents. Like I said, typically that's whoever was sitting on the committee. But sometimes if we don't have someone on the committee, it will assign a point person. We also as a group will talk about identifying impact of new or revised documents, and then we'll talk about how each of the businesses is adjusting to those impacts accordingly. And overall, being involved in the DDC or following the DDC developments does enable us to have a longer lead time and for us to plan and respond to any impact. That's been hugely valuable. And I think a great recent example of that is with CLSI EP 25, which is the guideline for stability studies. We have a representative on that committee, and stability studies are longer lead time studies. So it was important for us to know what direction that committee was heading so that we could make sure that, look, if they're going to say we now need to test 4 reagent lots instead of 3, we need to make sure that we're preparing to do that and planning for that. Now, fortunately, they did not recommend that, but those are the kinds of things that you need to think about and one of the advantages to being involved in those discussions so that you know what's going on. So in summary, here is just a roadmap, finding some bullet points. First, creating an elevator speech, which I didn't mention earlier, but really that is what enabled me to initially form this team, was an elevator speech to our senior leadership about why this is important. Then of course, building a team, representing key stakeholders, identifying CLSI topic areas that are relevant to your business, implementing a volunteer vetting and training process, communicating regularly on developments and opportunities, then of course commenting and voting on CLSI documents, and then providing training to identify training to your teams, identifying impact and adjusting to that accordingly. That's the last of my slides. Here are some other final slides, and I'll turn it over to Katie now. Thank you.
Hi, Katie, you're on mute. Could you unmute yourself, please?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Victoria. We really enjoyed listening to that. I loved everything you had to say, and hearing about your experience as a delegate for CLSI. Especially really liked the piece about the elevator speech to explain your involvement and why CLSI is important to your company. Jessica, do you want to start with, actually, we'll just open it up to questions. So anyone on the phone can submit a question using the Q&A feature. Just type in your question and we will answer it live here. Jess, do you want to start with one if you have it?
I believe Darian has the questions.
Yes,
Oh.
we do have several. Yeah, we do. And participants, feel free to utilize that Q&A panel at the bottom to submit your questions. Everything that is submitted is only seen by the presenters. We do have several that already came into the queue, so I'm going to go ahead and ask the first question. How did you identify who would be on the CLSI Intelligence Team?
So what I did first is I looked at the volunteer roster to see who was currently volunteering. And then I also reached out to the division vice presidents from regulatory, quality, and the technical organizations from each of Abbott's businesses. And I let them know who was currently volunteering in their organization. And then I explained to them my mission for creating the team too. So through that, sometimes they identified people who are already volunteering. In some cases, they chose someone else. So the individuals who are on the team, some of them are actually current volunteers, but certainly not all of them. And I would say fewer than half actually are. And so it was a combination of groups. I will say that originally when we set up the team, I was originally thinking that regulatory and quality might be the most appropriate individuals as being part of the team. And for some businesses, that does work out well. But I've actually found that I'm getting most comments and engagement from those from technical areas. So that's been an interesting realization for me. And if I were to restart it, and when I'm looking for voices now, I tend to lean a little bit more toward individuals with a stronger technical background.
Great, thank you. And could you clarify, are all CLSI volunteers part of the team?
Not formally, but what I do is I am in communication with all of the CLSI volunteers, and I copy them on meeting minutes, notes. I just am not expecting them to come to all of our monthly meetings. They're welcome to, but I'm not, saying, okay, I really need you here, because they're not the individuals who are recruiting volunteers. They just may have been someone who was recruited.
Aha. And how many people are on the team?
Right now, I have about 25 people who are on the team. as I mentioned earlier, I started out with roughly 12, and that's more than doubled in size. And I would say it sort of ebbs and flows as people move on to other roles, or they recognize that they might not be the best person suited for the team. They'll step away and ask for someone else to be included. So it morphs here and there.
Okay, let's see. Moving on to the next question. How much time do you spend leading the team and what are your responsibilities?
So I would say in terms of the monthly meetings, they are 1 hour per month. So I dedicate that amount of time, of course. And in preparing for those meetings, I would say I sort of prepare throughout the month, and I spend maybe another hour or two cumulatively just putting things together. All told, I would say that leading the team itself, I spend probably 8 hours a month. But in addition, I also volunteer on CLSI activities. So sometimes it's hard for me to separate, okay, what is me volunteering, say, on the Consensus Council versus leading the team itself, because some of that information can overlap for me, which is great. And so I spend anywhere from, I would say, 8 hours to, I could easily spend 40 hours a month doing it. But I try to delegate a lot as well.
Thank you. Your next question, do you and the team members review and comment on every document?
No. So at first I was thinking, oh gosh, as a delegate, I have to review and comment on everything. But that's why I put into place the matrix that I mentioned, was because that way I could see, all right, which documents do I really need to comment on, and make sure that we focus our efforts on just those. Also, I'm not an expert on, say, point of care, for example. So, and I also don't have the time to review and comment on every document. So what I do try to do is, if I know that a document is important to a particular business or multiple business areas, I will make sure that those representatives are either reviewing the document and commenting, or finding someone else in their organization to do so.
Thank
That
you.
I would say is one of the most challenging things, is carving out that time to review and comment on documents.
Mm-hmm. Does Abbott have people who are 100% dedicated to standards development?
We do. We have 2 people in our corporate office who are dedicated full-time to standards development. And I know that at least one person in one of the other divisions who is dedicated. However, they're not necessarily dedicated specifically to CLSI standards or even laboratory standards in general. They're also looking at involvement in other standards types of organizations like ISO, for example, or AMI or DSI and whatnot. So yeah.
And how do reps manage volunteer responsibilities with their core job responsibilities?
That really varies. For a lot of people, it's an add-on type of responsibility. So you have to get somebody who is really enthusiastic and interested. And so they're doing it because they're interested in it, and they're not necessarily always given the time by their management. Now, some managers are great about really giving people the time to work on it. And that, of course, is better. And I know that I benefited from having a manager like that, who was, I actually approached the manager saying, look, I see this opportunity. It sounds really interesting. Can I volunteer? I think at the time it was for possibly a linear CLSI EP6 at the time. And so that's great when you are given that extra time, but it really does vary a lot. Some managers are great about giving the time, some, like I said, are not. what I try to do is when somebody does volunteer, particularly if they're a new volunteer, I'll actually talk with both them and their manager so that they recognize the expectations and know that it's going to be a lot more effective if they can at least dedicate some time to volunteering.
Thank you. And your next question, how long has the CLSI Intelligence Team been in place at Abbott?
So formally at Abbott since October of 2021. So it's still kind of new. Like I said, we had sort of pockets. Prior to joining corporate offices, I was doing this more informally in the diagnostics division that I was in, but formally only about a year and a half.
Do you have any lessons learned? For example, things that you tried with the intelligence team that did not work?
Yes, definitely. One is like I said before, trying to review everything. That just wasn't possible, and I wasn't the right person to do it. So certainly delegating and finding some key people. I know that for myself, there are certain people that I can always count on. And I'm so very appreciative of those individuals. So I know that if something comes through on point of care, for example, that I can send a document to my point of care representative on our team, and either he will review and respond to those concerns, or he will delegate it to somebody else within the point of care business. I can also count on him to make sure that he's gathering information and circulating information and communicating with his colleagues within that business. So that's huge. And I have, a couple of other people too, like that. I wouldn't say that I have someone in every business yet who I can count on to do that, but I'm striving toward that. So for me, identifying the right person, the right contacts has been huge. The other is to, like I said, putting together that matrix to identify what documents are really most important to us has also been a really key move and step for us.
Thank you. And how do you know who to route documents to for comment?
So I really rely on that core team of individuals to tell me or route it themselves, or forward it, I should say, themselves. So I'll route it to the core team or the individuals from the core team who have identified that a particular document is important to their business. And then they know, and I have because I have asked them in advance, they know that it's their responsibility then to reach out to their colleagues to make sure that they get the right input.
A question about tracking. How do you track and manage internal comments?
So what we have been doing is we've been using an Excel spreadsheet that CLSI used to send out, saying, okay, put any comments that you have here along with the line number and reason or recommendation for change. So what we have been using is an Excel file like that I post to a SharePoint. And then once I collect, get everyone's comments, I'll sort through them and look to see if there are any conflicting comments, follow up if something's not clear, challenge if I'm not sure that it's something you really want to comment on, and then resolve and then submit a single set of comments. With CLSI's new feature that was presented today, we'll probably adjust that a bit and start using that feature. And as we're going through comments then too, I'll probably, and sometimes I do this anyway, call a small meeting with individuals who have commented to say, okay, you stated this, but do you really mean that? Or you stated this here, but is that going to adversely affect, say, our colleagues in the molecular business? Is that going to be beneficial for them as well? So I will likely change that a little bit with the new process.
Are there things you have not done yet that you plan to do, or other improvements you are considering?
So I do plan to refine our training process. I think that we could do a better job in our training. Like I said, I'm relying a lot on CLSI's training that they have, which is very valuable, but I'd like to tailor it a little bit more to Abbott. And also, I would like to work a little bit more on the vetting process, and because volunteers, the skill sets that you need for a document development committee are a little bit different from the skill sets that you might want to have in a volunteer on an expert panel, for example, or consensus council or board of directors. So I'd like to tweak that a little bit more.
And we have one last question in the queue, Vicki, about volunteer time. Are the volunteers given time to dedicate to CLSI activities, or is the time added on to their regular responsibilities?
So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, it varies with the groups. I think that especially with the elevator pitch that I've been doing a lot of, mini pitches throughout the company. That's helped in managers recognizing that, okay, it's really beneficial for all of us if we can carve out time for people to dedicate. So I would say it's still a combination. For some individuals, it ends up being add-on time. For others, they are given the time, and for others, it's sort of a combination. They're given some time, but maybe they could use more.
Thank you so much. That was the last question. Before we wrap up, do you have any final comments?
I do not, other than to say thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my experience, and think it's a great organization. So thank you.
Thanks again, Victoria, and thanks to all the attendees for joining. We'll have another member webinar and in the future, and we will send out emails with today's recording. Thanks for joining.
And with that, we must conclude today's webinar. And if you have any questions, please send them to membership@clsi.org. A link to a recorded version of this webinar will be sent to you by email within the next 2 weeks. Thank you for your participation in today's webinar. We hope to see you here again soon. Today's program is copyright 2023 by the Clinical and Laboratory Standards Institute with all rights reserved. And this does conclude today's program. Thanks again. You may now disconnect.